Hey guys, Tanner here. Welcome back to another Tanner Shapiro visuals video. Today we're going to be talking about mirrorless cameras and DSLR cameras. What are the differences and which one should you get? So we're going to go ahead and start off with DSLR cameras, or digital single lens reflex. So here I'm going to throw up a diagram on what happens when light travels through a DSLR camera. Basically you have light going in, it's going to bounce off a mirror, sometimes off another mirror, and then it goes right through the viewfinder. And then that's what you're looking at. You're physically looking through the lens when you look into the viewfinder of a DSLR camera. Kind of like this one, the Canon 5D Mark II. It's regarded as pretty much one of the best cameras that Canon's ever made in terms of like innovation and ease of use and photo quality in pretty much the last decade and a half. It feels comfortable in the hand and it's reliable, clearly, as I still have this one. Takes decent photos. What more do you need? As far as tech specs go, it's going to have a full frame sensor, 21 megapixels, shoots 1080p video, and that's really it. Now, if you're not a professional photographer, you might say, well, this camera's really big and heavy, and I don't know if I want to carry this around with me when I'm just on vacation or something like that. For most people, they don't want to do that, so that's totally fine. The reason it's so big is because they need to make room for the mirror inside the camera. It's one big mechanical process going on in here. The mirror lifting up and then the light exposing and it closing and all that going on there. When you're shooting with a DSLR, you're going to be looking in the viewfinder most of the time, referring to your light meter to see where your exposure is. It's the same thing as shooting on a film camera, just there's a computer in here that processes the image immediately versus having to, go develop your film. So back in 2008, this was really the camera to have. So a lot of DSLR shooters are going to argue that learning on a DSLR is better than learning on a mirrorless camera because you have a more traditional learning curve. It really helps you understand all those settings that you're changing and things like that when you can't really see them represented in real time. They also argue that the weather sealing is better and they're just more rugged and durable. And I mean, I've had both these cameras for over a decade and they still take photos and work totally fine. So there is definitely something to say to the reliability of DSLRs. But basically the gist of a DSLR is that there's a mirror in it, and a mirrorless camera, there isn't. So now here's a diagram of what goes on inside a mirrorless camera. The light travels through the lens and then exposes directly onto the sensor. There's no mirrors in this camera, hence the name mirrorless. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I'm a big fan of the Sony A7 Ii. It's super small and compact, it takes great photos, it's just a really nice little package. This came out in, I believe, 2015. 24.1 megapixels, a full frame sensor, shoots 1080p video, and it's really small, lightweight, and compact. You might be wondering, why is this one so small compared to the 5D Mark II? This actually technically takes higher resolution photos because it has 24 megapixels versus 21. Is that a huge difference? It depends on the person, really. The biggest difference you're going to find when shooting with a mirrorless camera, like I am this video right now, is that when you look in the viewfinder, you're not actually physically looking through the lens. It's just another screen. I actually see that as a benefit. Why? All those changes you're making to your aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, you can actually see those represented in real time. Whereas on a DSLR, you have to refer to your light meter. See how I'm changing the aperture and I can see the photo getting darker or lighter? Now, a lot of boomers will call this cheating, but really I see it as just another tool to help you get the photo that you want, especially if you're a beginner. When you can actually see how your photo is changing as you're changing those settings, I think it helps you understand what's actually going on, more so than just referring to your light meter. Like I said before, there's an argument where learning to shoot on a DSLR gives you that more traditional learning curve, but it might be a little harder to understand if you can't really see what those changes are doing. My script is up. So obviously the three big players in the camera market are going to be Canon, Nikon, and Sony. Canon and Nikon were pretty much, the two biggest contenders years ago, and they only made DSLR cameras. And then Sony came through and started kind of blowing them out of the water, making these mirrorless cameras that were outperforming those DSLRs, oftentimes for less money. I think it's really safe to say that Canon and Nikon wouldn't be making mirrorless cameras right now if it weren't for Sony. But that's a good thing because now we have more competition. Mirrorless cameras, and typically Sony's mirrorless cameras, have been undercutting the competition price-wise, at least with their camera bodies, for quite some time now. For sake of comparison, we're going to do beginner cameras and then higher-end professional cameras. To start off, we're going to compare Sony's A6100 and Canon's Rebel T7i. They're both basically classified as beginner cameras, and they're only $50 apart. After we compare the specs of each camera, you can be the judge of which one is more suited for your money. So what is similar about these two cameras? Well, they're both 24 megapixels on a APS-C or crop sensor. That's about where the similarities end. The A6100 can shoot 4K video, while the T7i can only do 1080p. Now, you might not use the A6100's 4K video capability, but why not have the capability there in the first place? The A6100 can shoot at 11 frames per second. What does that mean? Well, it's really important for action photography. You can essentially shoot 11 photos in 1 second. That's rapid burst shooting. The T7i can do almost half that at 6 frames a second. So if you're trying to take some really good sports photos, you're going to want to be shooting at 11 frames a second, not 6. The A6100 has 425 autofocus points across the sensor, meaning it just has more points to hunt for focus. It also has Sony's real-time animal and human eye autofocusing technology in it, and it works really, really well. Whenever I shoot weddings, it's like a breeze to get perfectly focused photos. The T7i has 45 autofocus points and no facial tracking technology. And then for the record, the A6100 is smaller and lighter than the T7i, which a lot of normies are going to appreciate. So a quick review. For an extra $50 for the Sony A6100, you are getting a smaller and lighter camera body, better capability for video, a much better autofocus system with eye tracking for animals and humans, much faster burst mode for action photos, and that's really it. Now keep in mind, photo quality across the board is generally the same. I mean, there might be some differences in colors and sharpness and things like that depending on Canon's lenses and Sony's lenses. It's just everything around that. The creature comforts of the camera, better autofocus, smaller and lighter, or whatever. It's just a more comfortable shooting experience. This doesn't really change with higher end cameras as well. For example, let's compare the Sony A7 Ii to Canon's 5D Mark IV. The Sony Alpha A7 III at the time of this video is selling for $1,699 just for the body. 24.2 megapixels, full frame sensor. Now let's look at Canon's latest full-frame DSLR, the Canon 5D Mark IV, the newest version of that 5D Mark II I was showing you earlier. It's got a couple more megapixels at 30.3, and it retails for $2499.99. $2,499. What are you getting for that extra $800? You're getting a couple more megapixels, less autofocus points, a worse autofocus system, a bigger and heavier camera body, and a much slower burst mode for action photography. So in this scenario, I don't know why you would actually spend more money on a camera that doesn't perform to the same degree as the cheaper one. Now the 5D Mark IV did come out before the A7 III, but people are still buying them. Now, of course, everyone has their own reasons. Maybe you have a ton of Canon or Nikon lenses that you don't want to sell. Maybe you are a person with very big hands and you like a bigger camera. I've come across plenty of people who don't like the feeling of a small mirrorless camera. Totally valid. It really is all up to personal preference. And believe me, this is not some Canon or Nikon bashing video, and I'm not putting Sony up on the pedestal. To be honest, I think Sony's colors could be a little better off the bat compared to Canon and Nikon. I love Nikon lenses. Like, they're great. And I mean, my main camera is a Lumix, so whatever. And like I said, this is not a bash on Canon video because they've made some really good cameras recently. It's just the really good cameras they've made are mirrorless. Like their Canon M50, it's like $650. It shoots 4K video. And a lot of YouTubers use it for like their vlogs or whatever they do, and it's a really, really good little starter camera. In some cases, it might even be better than that Sony A6100 I was talking about earlier. The Canon R6 I got to use for like 5 minutes the other day. It was really cool, but again, mirrorless, not DSLR. The future of photography is mirrorless. Honestly, I prefer mirrorless over DSLR any day. Well, if we really get into it, and when it comes to my hobby photography, I'm shooting on film. But when I'm shooting a wedding for 12 hours straight, I don't want to carry that Nikon D850 around. I would rather carry around that Sony A7 Ii. No question. So a quick recap. DSLRs are bigger, bulkier, and often don't perform as well because they have big mirrors in them. Mirrorless performs better than DSLR. They are often smaller. There are no mirrors. The real point of this video is to spend your money wisely and do your research when it comes to buying a camera, because tons of people will walk into a Best Buy or a Fry's or wherever else they sell a camera, they look at a Canon Rebel and they go, that looks like a camera, so it must be good. That's not the case. I mean, at the end of the day, a camera is a box with light shining into it, but spend your money on the better product. That's the point I'm trying to get across here. So anyway, I hope that cleared some things up with the difference between DSLR and mirrorless cameras and maybe gave you a little more idea on which one to get. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like or a comment or something. If you didn't like it, then do the opposite of that. Dislike the video. Leave a comment that says something mean about me. I don't know. I'm glad that you watched it. But anyway, I'll be back next week with another video. Thanks for watching. Peace.